town of Seffner, Florida, near Tampa, where last night the earth opened up as it does increasingly and
There is breaking news right now, the tornado watch as we come on and the severe storms, the air traffic control center.
Unfortunately, this left for short.
Well, it's not easy being a tree, especially after years of drought.
Beetles have destroyed tens of millions of trees.
In the last 30 days, more American land has burned, flooded, collapsed, and frozen than at any point in recorded memory. Not one disaster, not two, all of them, at the same time. Fires are consuming forests in states that have never burned before. Rivers are drying up and exposing things that were buried for centuries.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
The ground beneath entire neighborhoods is simply giving way. And in the middle of all of this, sounds are coming from the sky that no meteorologist has been able to fully explain. Most people are watching these events one at a time. A news segment here, a social media clip there. And because they are separated, they look random. They are not random. This video connects what the headlines are refusing to connect. And what emerges from that connection is something that millions of Americans are already feeling in their bones, but cannot yet put into words. Stay with this, because it starts right now. It started in Georgia, not California, not Arizona, Georgia, a state that most Americans would never place on a list of wildfire dangers, suddenly had more than 700 separate fires burning at the same time. Residents described ash falling from the sky like snow. Highways disappeared beneath walls of orange smoke. Families who had lived on the same land for 3 generations stood in their driveways holding garden hoses, watching fire move toward them faster than they could think. Then Florida ignited. The Everglades, one of the most water-dense ecosystems in North America, burned. Thick columns of smoke rose so high they were visible from space. Highways shut down. Schools closed. The air turned the color of rust. Then Maine, a state bordered by the Atlantic Ocean, covered in moisture for most of the year, began burning in ways that left forestry officials publicly admitting they had no precedent for what they were seeing. By the time the numbers were counted, more than 1.9 million acres had already burned, and the peak of summer heat had not even arrived yet. Here is what makes this different from every other fire season America has experienced. It is not the size, it is the location. When fire burns in California, people are sad but not surprised. The infrastructure exists. The response teams are trained. The mental model is already built. But when fire erupts simultaneously in the American South, the Northeast, and the Deep South, the mental model breaks. There is no category for this, no historical file to open and say, this happened before, here is what we do. People are not just losing homes, they are losing the feeling that they know where danger lives. And that loss of certainty is spreading faster than the flames themselves. Now consider this. The book of Joel, written thousands of years ago, described a fire that devoured everything before it and left only wilderness behind. Ancient words. But residents of 3 American states are currently living inside that description without choosing to. Whether that connection means something to you or not, it raises a question worth sitting with. Why these states? Why this season? Why all at once? Because while the South was burning, something completely opposite was happening 2,000 miles away. And the contrast is so sharp it almost doesn't seem real. While Georgia choked on smoke, Colorado disappeared under snow. Not a light dusting. Nearly 27 inches fell in a single storm in the middle of May. Roads that had been dry and clear vanished overnight. Drivers woke up to find their vehicles buried. Mountain passes closed. Communities that should have been moving into spring found themselves locked inside conditions that felt more like January than May. Residents described the feeling as deeply disorienting. Not frightening in the way a tornado is frightening, more unsettling, like something had quietly gone wrong with time itself. And then look south of those snowfields. The Colorado River, which supplies drinking water to 40 million Americans across 7 states, is receding at a rate that scientists describe as historically unprecedented. As the water pulls back, the riverbed and the edges of Lake Mead are revealing things that were submerged for generations. Stone foundations, aligned structures, formations that appear deliberate rather than natural. People standing on the dry shoreline are describing a specific feeling that is hard to explain. It is not excitement. It is not curiosity. It is closer to the feeling of walking into a room and realizing something has been moved. The sense that the world has quietly rearranged itself while nobody was watching. In one part of the country, the land is on fire. In another, it is frozen. In a third, the water that civilization depends on is disappearing and revealing what it once concealed. These are not 3 stories. They are 3 symptoms. When a human body runs a fever in one place, freezes in another, and begins losing fluid it cannot replace, that is not 3 separate problems. That is one systemic crisis, expressing itself in multiple locations at the same time. The land appears to be doing something similar. Scientists point to shifting jet streams, long-term drought cycles, and the compounding effects of years of environmental pressure. These are real explanations that deserve serious consideration. But even the scientists reviewing this data are using language they have not used before. Words like unprecedented, accelerating, outside our models. And here is the part that stops many people cold. These events are not building slowly toward a peak. They are already at a level that would have been considered a peak just 10 years ago, which raises an uncomfortable question. If this is not the peak, what is? The answer to that may already be written in what the Earth is doing beneath our feet, because the ground itself is no longer staying still. The sinkhole did not announce itself. One moment the road existed, the next it did not. A section of pavement in a residential neighborhood simply dropped away, taking everything above it into a cavity that had been silently forming for years. No earthquake preceded it. No storm triggered it. The ground just decided it could no longer hold. Across Florida, California, and Texas, this scene is repeating. Not in remote areas, not in industrial zones, in neighborhoods, on streets where children ride bikes and families walk dogs, and people assume the ground beneath them is permanent. What is happening underground is a process that engineers call subsidence. Water that once filled the spaces between rock and soil layers is gone. Drought removes it. Overuse depletes it. And when those spaces empty, they do not stay empty. They collapse. Sometimes slowly over years. Sometimes in seconds. The terrifying part is that it is invisible until it is not. There are no warning signs that a family can see from their front porch. No cracks appear in the days before. No sounds give notice. The first indication that something is wrong is often the disappearance of the thing itself. This is not only a geological event, it is a psychological one. When the ground beneath your feet becomes unreliable, something shifts in how a person moves through the world. Every step carries a new question. Every familiar road becomes slightly less certain. The feeling is not dramatic, it is quiet and persistent. And it is spreading across communities that have never had to think about it before. At the same time that sinkholes are opening across the country, something else is happening that scientists are struggling to categorize. In several coastal regions, the ground is not just collapsing downward, it is moving sideways. Subtle shifts, a few millimeters here, a painted road line no longer matching its original position, a building foundation sitting at an angle no one can explain. The Earth is not simply failing, it appears to be reorganizing. Researchers examining the data from multiple states are finding a pattern that they cannot yet fully account for. The movements are too coordinated to be isolated incidents, too widespread to have individual local causes. Something beneath the surface of this country is changing, and it is not only beneath the ground. Because while the land was collapsing and shifting, something in the water drew attention that no scientific report has fully resolved. Something that fishermen off the Pacific coast captured on video. Something that marine biologists reviewed and declined to formally identify. What they saw in that water is the next part of this story. The fishermen were 3 miles offshore when the water changed. Not violently. The surface did not break. There was no disturbance. But something beneath it began moving with a kind of controlled, deliberate speed that none of the men had seen in decades of working those waters. Then it surfaced. The footage is shaky. It always is in these moments. But what it captured was enough to send the clip to marine biologists at 2 separate research institutions. Both reviewed it. Neither issued a formal identification. The creature was long, unnaturally long. Its movement was rigid rather than fluid, cutting through the water without the wide flexing arc that large sea animals typically use. Along its back, a defined ridge of what appeared to be dorsal spikes created a silhouette that matched nothing in the documented catalog of species known to inhabit American coastal waters. The fishermen described its behavior as the most unsettling part. It did not flee. It did not attack. It circled, slowly, deliberately, as if it was aware of being watched and had chosen to remain visible. Hours before the sighting, residents along that stretch of coastline had reported low vibrations rising through the hulls of boats, deep rhythmic pulses that felt geological rather than biological. That detail connects to something significant. In the same period that this creature was filmed, deep-sea organisms known as oarfish began washing ashore along multiple U.S. coastlines, alive, uninjured, and far from any environment they naturally inhabit. Oarfish live at depths where sunlight does not reach. They are almost never seen near the surface while alive. In coastal communities across Japan, their appearance has historically been treated as a warning that something is about to shift beneath the ocean floor. Japanese records preceding several major earthquakes include documented oarfish beachings in the weeks prior. Scientists are careful to point out that correlation is not causation. And that is a fair and important point. But here is what is harder to dismiss. These beachings are not spread across months or years. They are clustered, happening in the same narrow window of time as the fires, the sinkholes, the disappearing river water, and the moving ground. The ocean is releasing things it has held in the deep. The land is releasing things it has held underground. And now the sky is doing something that has no clean explanation either, because in several states, people looked up and heard something that made them stop completely. A sound that did not belong to any storm. A sound that dozens of witnesses described using the same word. A trumpet. It was heard first in the Midwest. A low, resonant tone that rose slowly from somewhere above the cloud line. Not thunder. Thunder has a crack, a randomness, a quick release. This was sustained. Structured, it built in intensity over several seconds, and then faded, leaving behind a silence that witnesses described as heavier than normal silence. Within hours, the same sound was reported in Nevada, then Texas. In each location, the pattern was identical. Animals reacted before humans did. Dogs refused to go outside. Horses pushed against stable walls. Birds launched from trees in sudden coordinated bursts, as if responding to a signal rather than a threat. Then the humans heard it. Recordings spread online quickly, and the comment sections filled with a single recurring observation. People who had never met, living in states thousands of miles apart, used almost identical language to describe what they heard. Ancient, directed, not of this world. Meteorologists reviewed the recordings and offered explanations involving atmospheric pressure differentials and temperature inversions. These are real phenomena. They can produce unusual sounds under specific conditions. But here is what the atmospheric explanations do not fully account for. The sounds appeared in multiple locations, with different weather conditions simultaneously. The timing correlated exactly with the pressure anomalies that preceded the sinkhole events described earlier. And in at least 2 locations, the sounds were followed within hours by measurable ground movement. The 3 events, sound from above, movement from below, disturbance from the sea, appeared to be connected by timing in a way that random coincidence struggles to explain. For millions of Americans watching this unfold in real time, the response was not scientific. It was instinctive, deeply personal, and for many, deeply spiritual. The Apostle Paul wrote in his first letter to the Thessalonians about a trumpet sound preceding a moment of cosmic significance. That verse, studied for centuries as symbolic and prophetic language, suddenly felt less distant to people who had just heard something unexplainable coming from the sky above their homes. Whether the interpretation is spiritual or scientific, the emotional impact is the same. Something is communicating, something is signaling. Something that does not operate on a human schedule is making itself known through multiple channels at the same time. And it is not staying in the sky. Because when those sounds faded and people looked back down at the world around them, they found that the trees were dying. Not slowly, not seasonally, almost overnight. And the pattern of which trees were dying and which were not is the detail that no one has been able to explain. The trees did not turn brown gradually. In several regions across California, healthy trees that had stood for decades were reported as completely lifeless within a matter of days, not weeks, days. Residents who drove the same roads every morning described watching entire sections of forest change color between Monday and Friday. What made it stranger was the selectivity. A cluster of trees on one side of a road would be standing gray and brittle. On the other side, 10 feet away, the trees were untouched. No disease visible to the naked eye explained the boundary. No soil report accounted for why the line fell exactly where it did. Scientists are examining drought stress, beetle infestations, and soil composition changes as potential causes. All of these are plausible. All of them are being investigated. But the speed remains the part that does not fit the known models. Natural tree death from beetle infestation or disease typically progresses over months. What was being observed in these regions was compression. A process that should take a season appeared to be taking days. The land is not just failing structurally. It is failing biologically. And this is not only an American story. In the same period that American forests were dying, European rivers were reaching historic low levels. Parts of Asia were experiencing rainfall events that broke century-old records in single afternoons. Regions of Africa and South America were recording crop failures that governments were quietly describing as generational in scale. The pattern is not regional, it is planetary. And when something affects the entire planet at the same time, the framework for understanding it has to expand beyond any single country, any single season, or any single cause. What is happening in the United States is the most visible piece of a much larger picture. And the reason it is most visible here is partly because America has the infrastructure to document it and the media landscape to amplify it. But make no mistake, the rest of the world is watching these American events, not with distance, but with recognition, because they are seeing versions of the same things in their own countries. Fires, floods, ground failures, species behaving in ways they should not, sounds that do not match any known meteorological event. The Earth appears to be under a pressure that is expressing itself in every language, on every continent, at the same time. And there is one more American event in this sequence that has not been fully addressed yet. One that happened not in nature, but in the infrastructure that holds human civilization together. A bridge that stood for years simply fell. There was no warning, no inspection report flagging imminent danger, no visible cracks that morning, no sound before the sound. One moment the bridge existed as it had for years, carrying weight, connecting places, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Then it collapsed. Massive sections of concrete dropped, without the hesitation that people somehow expect from large things when they fail. Witnesses nearby described the speed of it as the most disturbing part. Not the noise, not the dust, the speed. How quickly something that represented permanence became debris. No one standing near that bridge in the moments before it fell would have believed it was about to happen. And that is precisely the point. America has built its modern life on a set of assumptions. That the roads will hold, that the power will stay on, that the water from the tap is safe, that the bridge between here and there will be there tomorrow morning. These assumptions are so deeply embedded that most people do not even experience them as assumptions. They experience them as facts. What is happening across the country right now is the systematic exposure of those assumptions as fragile. The fires reveal that weather safety maps are outdated. The sinkholes reveal that underground infrastructure is depleting faster than it is being replaced. The dying forests reveal that biological systems are under stress that monitoring programs did not predict. And the bridge collapse reveals that the physical structures holding civilization together have been quietly weakening while attention was directed elsewhere. This is not a political statement. It is an engineering reality that analysts across the country are beginning to say out loud. Systems that were built for one set of conditions are now operating under a completely different set of conditions. And the gap between what they were designed to handle and what they are being asked to handle is growing faster than the repair schedules can close it. Jesus described something like this in the 7th chapter of Matthew: a structure that appears solid, a foundation that looks strong from the outside. And the moment the pressure arrives, the revelation of what was always true beneath the surface, that the strength was never as deep as it appeared. That image is not just spiritual. It is structural. It is civic. It is personal. And for millions of Americans watching these events accumulate, the feeling is not panic. It is something quieter and harder to shake. The feeling that the ground they built their lives on, literally and figuratively, is less certain than they were told. Which raises the question that every section of this video has been building toward. What does a person do with that feeling? Fear is not the right response. This is important to say clearly, because everything about this moment pulls toward fear. The scale of the events, the speed of the changes, the feeling that multiple systems are failing at the same time. All of it creates pressure that the human nervous system was not designed to carry indefinitely. But the people who have historically navigated moments like this most effectively were not the ones who panicked. And they were not the ones who looked away either. They were the ones who got honest. Honest about what was happening. Honest about what they could not control. Honest about what they had been placing their security in. And honest about whether those foundations were actually capable of holding the weight they had been given. This country was built by people who understood that the visible world is not the whole world. That there are forces operating beneath and above the surface of daily life that do not appear on weather maps or engineering reports. That stability is not something infrastructure produces. It is something that flows from a deeper source. That understanding did not make those people naive. It made them grounded in a way that allowed them to keep moving when everything around them was uncertain. The book of James says something simple and direct. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. 4,000 years of human civilization have tested that statement in every possible condition. Wars, famines, plagues, collapses. And the testimony that comes back from the people who lived through those moments is not that the circumstances became easier, it is that something inside them became stronger than the circumstances. That is available right now, not as a religious product, not as a comfort that requires ignoring what is real, but as a genuine reorientation toward a source of stability that does not depend on whether the ground holds, or the bridge stands, or the forecast is accurate. The events described in this video are real. The pattern is real. The pressure is real. And the response that has outlasted every previous crisis in human history is also real. It begins with something as simple as stopping, acknowledging what is happening, and asking, out loud or silently, whether the foundation being stood on is one that can hold what is coming. That is not weakness. That is the most practical thing a person can do in a moment when practical answers are running out. But there is one more thing to address, because while this video has covered what is visible, there is something happening that is not yet fully visible. Something beneath the surface of all of these events that researchers, geologists, and analysts are only beginning to piece together. And what they are finding changes the entire picture. There is a location in the United States that sits at the intersection of every event described in this video. A geological zone where ground movement, atmospheric disturbance, water depletion, and biological change are all occurring simultaneously, and where the data from the past 6 months does not match any model that researchers were using 12 months ago. Scientists reviewing the convergence of these signals are not using the word coincidence anymore. They are using a different word, precursor. That word has a specific meaning in geology and atmospheric science. It means a signal that reliably appears before something larger, not a cause. A warning, a pattern that historically shows up in the data before a primary event that the instruments did not directly predict. The question being asked in research circles right now is not whether the signs are real. They are real. The question is what they are preceding. And the answer to that question involves a part of this country that most Americans have never thought about as a risk. A place that sits quietly beneath the surface of normal life, holding a pressure that has been building for longer than the nation has existed. That story is coming. And when it does, everything discussed today will finally make sense.